Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Julie Barkus, and joining me is,
Hey, good morning. It is Michael Tasner.
and we'd like to welcome you to the Get Connected show, where we are here to help you thrive and really make it beyond the situations that we're currently in so that you can accelerate your childcare business success. But I think not only, affecting you in your business, but also personally as well. So we really want to help you just have what I would call a dreamy life, because after all, you really deserve it. So I'm thrilled to be here with you. I don't even know, how many episodes are we on now, Michael?
So I think this is our fourth week. I think this is episode
Woo!
7, I believe. So yeah, I think
Yeah, this is
we're cranking
awesome.
along.
Yeah, so if you're here tuning in, feel free to say hello. We will come back and read comments after the show. We are here Tuesdays and Thursdays, 9 a.m. Central Standard Time. And let others know that we're here doing this. And if you missed a show, scroll down, whatever platform you're watching this on, and make sure you catch the past episodes, because there was just so much good information.
Definitely. Lots and lots of value bombs and some great guests that we've had so far, and lots of other really cool guests coming up as well.
Yeah, I'm excited about some of our future guests. So it's going to be fun. So today I know we wanted to talk about, some hard-hitting stuff with self-motivation, rejuvenation, and really thriving beyond present circumstances, because I think it's such a mindset that we get into. And especially for those who haven't been working or haven't been, working at full capacity to brush your hair or get out of your pajamas and really get back into cultivating the life that you want. And I love what Lee Hayward said last week, is that you've really got to dress and project the image for where you want to go. And I think that's part of developing the mindset, is really thinking not about today, but where is it that you want to be in, a week, 6 weeks, 6 months from now, and really start putting that image forward. And I've given some thought to that too. And I thought that was a really valuable point that she shared with us last week.
Oh, I mean, it definitely was relating to really just, I think a lot of, and I know this is the core focus of our topic for today, but I think a lot of people, they're just still grabbed by the fear, and the fear that is all around them, the fear that's, all over the news. And your parents are saying, and just that fear piece where it's then making it challenging for some people to really take the actions and make those next steps. Because I've always said, a lot of you really know what you need to do. It's the follow through, it's the execution of actually,
Yes.
making this stuff happen. So you need to kind of be managing and motivating your staff. And that you need to be doing, Facebook Live like this, for example, to engage with your staff and your parents. And there's this list, and it's not an insanely long list, but there's a list of a couple things that deep down that will really help propel you to that next level. But to your point, and the topic for today is really just around, self-motivation, and how do you start to break free from some of these barriers so that you can start to take the action. So I sent out an email to my list, when was it, last week? And I just said, do you have any questions? What's stopping you? Do you have any blocks? And a lot of interesting stuff back. And a lot of them were, similar things. How do I encourage the parents to come back that are worried, and things like that? But there also were probably 10, 15 different messages back just relating to things that I would kind of lump in the category of fear. How do I restart things? Should I restart things? What do I do next? And just a lot of challenges around that. So I thought this would be a good timely topic of just really helping you get motivated and self-motivation. That obviously, if you're not self-motivated, you're going to be, and I think this is one of the episodes that you shared this tip of, your energy then is going to attract, that type of energy around you. So if you're showing up and operating from a fear mindset, how is your staff and your team going to be seeing that and then reacting? It just continues to go in that cycle.
Yeah, and it's so true. And even people with really good mindsets right now are being challenged on a whole new level, because it really does challenge you. Isolation, and life, not living it as you normally would, really challenges even people with a strong mindset to, wonder what's in store. And it doesn't invoke a lot of that fear. And a lot of times when we're talking with our owners, they're like, oh, this is great, and I really need to motivate my staff. But what about me? Can you tell me something to motivate me? Can you tell me
Sure.
something to rejuvenate me? Can you tell me? So they're recognizing that that's a really important starting place is you and how motivated do you feel? How authentically and genuinely happy do you feel with your own life? And we could fake it, somebody shows up, we're happy, yay. But it's the times when you're alone or the times when you're having all of those thoughts, all those thoughts that just kind of sneak in there. Are those thoughts that are motivating you and encouraging you, or are they thoughts that are sabotaging you, keeping you stuck and living in a place of fear? So I love this topic that we're talking about today, and I could probably talk for like 7 days on the topic of motivation because it's been so huge for me in my life too. And it was a piece that I had to figure out was like, oh, okay, what's this motivation thing all about? What's this mindset piece all about? And I didn't even know that those were important components to look at. I thought you got up and just functioned. And, if you screwed up, it's, who you were meant to be in life. And, maybe you're not as good as the person next door or whatever it might be because you're getting different results or feeling different thoughts. But I learned you could totally change that, which is the magic.
No, definitely. And I thought what might be helpful for our listeners today is, similar to kind of where you were just headed, to kind of give me a personal story or two from each of us of, how I know that I've had, like all of us listening, have had struggles and challenges where, it's been tough to really get myself motivated, but I found that there were kind of a couple of core sets of actions that I had to take in order to really move that needle forward. So maybe we each kind of share a couple of tips and
and I love the stories, and I'm willing to be vulnerable and transparent with some of and I always am from the platform. People probably are learning a little bit too much about me when I speak on stage, but it's my life and I've moved through it with motivation. And motivation was my first fascination when I entered into the speaking world. It was just like mind boggling. Like nobody taught that. I'm a Catholic schoolgirl, and the nuns weren't talking to you about motivation, especially back in the days when I was there. It was like, they were talking to you about how you're going to be punished and about how you weren't right. And so when I discovered this whole new world, I was like, oh, wow, there's a different way to think, and that will propel you forward. So do you want to start? So what's a story? What's something in your life?
I think, for me, it and obviously the last couple of months, you can put that into whatever basket you would like. So I'd rather look at other times, I guess, that were just as challenging. So because everyone, I think, is just, so focused on the last 2 months. And I'm not saying that we need to ignore it, but I think we're finally kind of starting to come out on the other side. And there's a lot of positivity that's really starting to reemerge. So, for me, it was when I've had 2 different agencies, 2 digital marketing agencies. I'm in my second. And in the first one, I just found myself literally just not wanting to get out of bed and come to the office. So we had this nice office and team and great coffee, which was, I think, one of the suggestions of someone working for me. So, hey, we got to have like really, really great coffee for our clients and for all of our employees to keep them happy. So we tried like 8 different kinds of coffee. And I guess I made the team happier than our clients, but was getting to the point where I didn't see any end in sight. So what I mean by that is I was working 60, 70, 80 hours a week because I was running the lion's share of the strategy sessions with our clients. So I kind of built a business from the ground up. It was kind of my baby, so to speak, and really didn't want to relinquish any of that control. So not only was I just kind of working myself to death, but on the financial side, the top line was great, but the bottom line was horrendous. Every month we were losing money and I just couldn't figure out how to kind of get out of that hamster wheel or that mouse wheel, just kind of going round and round and round. And finally got to the place again where I just didn't even want to come to the office. So I started staying home. And I've always kind of believed in the right book in the right hands at the right time can completely change someone's life. So whether that's a book, an audio, a course, a Facebook Live, it really, any kind of educational content, I've always believed that timing is everything. So, there's lots and lots of different topics and things like that. But so I started studying kind of gratitude and happiness, but really started studying happiness before gratitude. And very started to quickly realize that, and there's lots of, I guess, quote unquote, secrets to happiness, and no means am I an expert in happiness, but started to realize that one of the best ways to really start to shift your mind is to start your day with gratitude. So I went and bought a really nice journal on, was it roguejournals.com or .net or something. They made really, really nice. They're still around to this day. Leather, like high-end journals. So I'm like, I want something that like looks really, really sharp and just looks nice. And for some reason, fancy office supplies tend to motivate me. So went and bought that. And then from there, just started my day from a place of gratitude. So just started writing, and I would write for 2 or 3 minutes, nothing crazy, and just whatever came to mind. And initially the things kind of started off like big things, grateful for my family, my business, a house, and things like that. But then as I started to kind of go through the exercises and kind of go through the rhythm, then I started writing things like how grateful that it was a sunny day today, or that the sun is already out and it's whatever, 7 a.m, and grateful for that nice cup of coffee on the way to work. So you start to really appreciate the smaller things. And it took for me, it just started to reframe my brain that a lot of what I was not even just worrying about, but complaining about was what I would call first world problems. I'm like complaining about, oh, I can't go do this right now, or I can't go buy that because I don't have enough money. But when you start to really appreciate more of those simpler things, and I know it's a cliche phrase, but when I started to read other books on happiness, and I think I've read 7 or 8, Happiness by Design, The Happiness Advantage, Tony Hsieh's book on happiness, the Zappos story, Delivering Happiness is his book. Every single one of those books, they had other tactics and tips and strategies, but every single one of those said you need to come from a place of gratitude. And anytime you're starting to really feel frustrated, down, discouraged, what I would do is I would stop, pause, I would pull out my gratitude journal, and I would just write. Just for a couple of minutes. And that little thing really started to shift my mindset. And it's still one of those kind of morning habits. I know that you have a lot of really great morning habits that kind of set you up for success for the day. I kind of call it priming. So kind of priming for the day when I kind of go through my routine of doing the kind of the gratitude journaling. I listen to some motivational YouTube videos. So maybe 10, 15 minutes just kind of in the background. So you're listening to that. Morning meditation. So I started to then combine all of the gratitude stuff with revamping my complete morning routine. And what I really discovered after kind of everything was that my morning routine was actually what was making me miserable and was setting my day up for failure. Because I would wake up and then, where's my phone? So the first thing I would do is roll over, grab my cell phone, start checking emails. Oh, geez, what fire? Oh, we already have a fire. And this client's mad. And this team member wants to talk about a raise, and all these kind of crazy things. So I was completely starting my day wrong. So when I focused on the little piece of gratitude, and then from there, just completely revamp my morning routine to really set me up for a productive day, I really started to see things turn around.
Ooh, that's powerful. And I think a lot of that is something that all of our owners and leaders can relate to, because there's a lot of people who feel like not getting out of bed. I always call it curling up in the fetal position, and just like you just want to lay there and like somehow be magically comforted. You don't really want to get out.
Sure.
But take us back to that point where you were laying in bed, you weren't wanting to get out of bed. What was it? Was it a thought? Was it something that came across you? What was it that said, you know what? I've got to start reading some books on happiness. I've got to start listening to some motivational speakers. So what was it for you? Because I know for me, there's so many defining moments that I could think of where it's like, oh, triggered to do something different. I know people are motivated typically by pain or by pleasure. And either we realize that we're just suffering way too much and we want to propel ourselves out of that, or we see something different for ourselves. We start cultivating that vision. So I'm just curious what it was for you.
Oh, that's a great question. I think there's a couple things. So there's one phrase that I've often said when I feel like I have my back against the wall, and that's the phrase "burn the boats." And to me, that simply means I've got to go all in. There is no plan B. There's no plan B, plan C, plan D. I have to make this work. So that's one of the phrases that kind of hit me first. But from there, it really was the motivator of pain. And when I started looking at, how much I could potentially lose. And it's not just the money. Obviously the money was a big factor, but it's what are the ripple effects. And I think I've mentioned to you kind of off camera, so to speak, but I'm getting my master's in business. It was on my bucket list last year.
Oh, nice.
And maybe I didn't, but my dissertation is due next week or a week. It's due pretty soon. So I guess I better start. But I've been interviewing people for the last 6 months on the topic of going out of business. So I've interviewed all different kinds of businesses, quite a few childcare centers, but lots of other industries. It's more of a general study of why did you end up going out of business? So these are businesses that closed. They either went bankrupt, they had to close, they shut down for some reason. And I started to realize that there's this huge ripple effect of when a business shuts down. It's not just, well, you shut down. It's, okay, well, what's the effect then on if you have employees? So if you look at a childcare center, so now let's say you have 5 people, 3 people, 20 people, whatever that number is, it doesn't matter. But now they're out of a job. Okay, great. So what else? Like, what are the other ripple effects? Well, all the parents and all the families that now they've got to go find childcare, and you look at the effects on the children that were coming. So it's creating stress in the parents' lives who are already stressed, creating stress in the children's lives. And then it continues to go down and down. So what about it if you're leasing the building? Well, now you're going to create some hardship for the person that was leasing because they've got to try and then it just continues to spiral. So what I really realized was, and I guess it's somewhat obvious, but maybe not, that the pain of going out of business, it is just horrendous. And I started to realize in talking with all these different entrepreneurs and business owners that a lot of their marriages ended up getting ruined. Some people, they lost their spouse. There were, really, really insane stories and insane, not in a good way.
Right.
People that, still haven't been able to get a mortgage on a house because they had to file for bankruptcy, and then all the credit situation. And so now they've been living in a small apartment, and like just all these stories. So not trying to dwell on everything here, but it was just the pain of really starting to think about, well, what could potentially happen if I don't make this work? And for me, that's always a motivator. And my brain tends to go to, what's the worst that could potentially happen? And when I start to think about that, like, well, geez, so sometimes I'll think about that to try and let me know that the worst case scenario really isn't that bad.
Yeah.
So like, what if I don't get what if you don't add this new family to your childcare center that's coming in for a tour? Okay, you're going to have a tour for someone else, and you're going to attract maybe a better family, or as you like to say, a more dreamy family. So like the worst case scenario there really isn't that terrible. But when I start to think about, well, if I don't get myself out of bed and I don't start coming, well, we could start to lose a ton of revenue. I put up my house to get a line of credit. Well, geez, then they could take my house, all these team members, all these clients. So the pain in my long-winded story here is really what then pushed me over the needle to say, I've got to figure something out. And that's kind of what, I guess, that trigger, as Tony Robbins likes to say, something changes within an instance. And when I was laying in bed thinking about all that stuff, I'm like, geez, this is not a good situation. I better figure some stuff out.
Yeah.
So,
what a powerful example. And I encourage everybody who's listening, if you're not propelled yet, you're not feeling motivated yet, you could actually draw out the pain for yourself. So you don't even have to let yourself get to the point where you experience the maximum pain, but think about the ripple effect, like Michael's talking about. Think about that impact in your life and draw it out to the worst case scenario and say, oh, okay. So you could actually get yourself into the pain to where it's like, oh, I want to make a different decision. So you can look at that right now, even with your business. Like if you're not feeling so motivated, or in your leadership role or whatever role you're playing, just really draw it out and sit there for a moment, take pen to paper and go, okay, here's where I'm at. If I keep spiraling downward, here's what the ripple effect is going to be. Here's what's going to be happening. Here's the chain of events, however you want to define it. As a result of me wanting to stay in this place. And I think about this a lot with getting healthier, with stepping out of my comfort zone and doing live videos. Well, if I don't do it, then here's what's going to happen. So let yourself feel the pain, take yourself down that path. And this is a huge, huge strategy for helping you turn it around, especially if you're finding that you can't turn it around. And then I want to also add in that I think it's really important that you don't let your business define you. You know, your business, your role, your title is not who you are. It's an extension of you. And just like you are changing and you are growing, at any time that can change, and that could, take a whole different life as well. So keep that in mind. Don't be defined by it, but you can be defined. What I think you should be defined by is your own happiness and how much happiness you're able to experience in this lifetime and walking down that path towards greater happiness. So I think that's an incredible story.
No, I appreciate that. And these are normally not the things that I tend to talk about. I tend to just be talking about marketing and things like business. But
I know we're digging a little deep today.
No, I mean, these are the things that, I like you. we both have been having some really, I don't want to use the word difficult, but what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe sensitive like conversations with our clients that we're working with. And that I said it in the last episode, and I will continue to say it, that I really believe that the next 3 to 6 months are really going to define you as a leader. They're going to define a lot of what ends up kind of coming out of the situation over the next couple of months. And so we really want to make, our job is to make sure that you've got all hands on deck, and we're trying to give you, stories and examples of things that are occurring as we speak. Both Julie and I are working with childcare centers day in and day out. That's all that we're doing. So we're able to see on the front lines, what's working. What are people having to do to motivate their staff and motivate themselves and find great talent and start ramping up your leads and your tours and grow your revenue and all of that good stuff. So I would love to hear, and again, I know that you've got, you've done a lot of amazing work around motivation and law of attraction and just lots and lots of stuff, but would love to kind of hear an example of something that our listeners could kind of put into practice as well to really self-motivate and to kind of get them out of that rut, or even if they're not necessarily in a rut, how could they move to the next level?
And to me, my whole life has been like a study. So I've got some, examples that I've been dealing with that have just kind of really defined my life. So for me, it really started very young. And I think this is where we have to look at our mindset and think about, well, how long ago was it that I really developed these thoughts that I'm thinking and these thoughts that are keeping me stuck in my life? And it's not just typically one situation. It's not just the pandemic. It happened before the pandemic. And then that determines like how we're handling things right now going forward, because you have some people right now who are incredibly motivated doing different things. And then some people are like, oh gosh, I'm really afraid and what's next. But we have to understand the core place of our mindset and that it was developed very, very young for us. And typically the thoughts that we're thinking, the thoughts that define us were developed or ingrained in us prior to the age of 7 in our lives. So all the messages that were not fed to us, all the different things that people were showing us were true about our lives at a very young age are the things that are currently defining us. And this is where our mind will default to whenever a situation unfolds, whether it's something with staff, whether it's something with parents, whether it's like Michael and Julie saying, do live videos, send text messages, your mind's going to default to a place. And I want to make this very clear because this has been my journey, is in understanding where my mind defaults to. And from early in my life, I was called a dummy. And it was by somebody who's very close to me. And I often share this story on platform. But, what I realized, I had this pivotal moment where I'm like 28 years old driving down the road. I missed my exit what do you think is the first word that pops into my mind? It's the words, "you dummy," of this person who loved me. And I hear them over and over and over again. And that was probably a big defining moment for me. When I was in my late 20s, I was going through a divorce, and the marriage became abusive. And I was like, what am I doing? And why am I staying in this? And is it more important for me to be liked by this person than to really be this brilliant, amazing, free-spirited kind of person that I always was growing up? So I really got stuck. When I was going through this divorce, filed restraining orders, to me, that was a defining moment where I'm like, I'm in a lot of pain. I'm in a lot of mental pain, and I feel really alone. And I feel like in my house, it's just me and the person who's dealing or dishing out the abuse. And that's, for me, one of the times in my life when I realized that my mindset and my motivation had to change. And I was in a place of feeling great pain. And I started looking at all different groups and different counseling and different kind of things to go through. And I never really connected with any of that. But just like Michael, I found a series of books in Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, Erroneous Zones by Dr. Wayne Dyer, that started changing my life. The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale, where he states, I think this was a quote I shared with you a couple shows ago, if you could change your thoughts, you could change your world. And I hung on to that. I'm like, if I could change my thoughts, I could change my world. And I was like, can it be that easy? And then I thought to myself, well, wait a second, is it really that easy to change your thoughts? And the answer was no. So for me, the story goes, and this is just one of the stories, is where it's like in abusive relationship, feeling a lot of pain, got to get out, got to get beyond that. And I've also cultivated mindset prior to that, where I took a corporate position as a clerk, and I don't know what it was. I quadrupled my income in a matter of several years. And I thought this was a fantastic thing, but I'm like, well, why did I do this? I'm not, I don't think I'm the smartest person in the world. And there's other people with their degrees. And at the time I didn't have one. And it came back to using your emotional intelligence, using the way that you manage your emotions to get ahead. And those were some of the foundational moments for me where I was like, oh, wait a second. If I use my emotions, if I become happy and communicative, that it's going to propel me forward professionally. And then when I got married and then the marriage became abusive, it took a whole different depth to me in understanding the power of our thoughts and the power of our thoughts to change our reality. And then actually I left the corporate world, got the divorce, and I started doing things, really big things, like getting press. I decided to be a public speaker, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to speak to anybody and everybody who's willing to listen, because I was being so moved by these words that I was reading. I was like, if I could change one person's life with my words, man, that would be like the best thing in the world. So I'm like, I'm going to go out, and Les Brown was one of my models and somebody who I was taking into my head every single day, listening to his words about how you got to be hungry and not give up. And I was like, wow, okay, this is powerful stuff. So I felt like I was on this energetic high. So I started getting in the press and the newspapers. I had regular columns going in television and entertainment guides, if anybody remember those. I started my own radio show where I got to interview the people who inspired me. So I interviewed Zig Ziglar, I interviewed Les Brown, I interviewed Jack Canfield, Dan Kennedy. I interviewed all these people that I thought were absolutely amazing. And I was just really digging deep into how much mindset changes your life. And, it didn't end at that point for me. Many of you who know my story, and I share it in my Childcare Business Success book, but also my husband, my second husband passed away in 2012, unexpectedly. And there were points where I was laying in bed and it was like, I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't move. And I remember just that feeling that you get where you get so paralyzed in the thoughts that you're thinking that you don't want to move forward. And then in that place, I started cultivating new strategies that I was going to be implementing going forward to regain a sense of happiness and peace in my life. Because in that moment when you're faced with death, you're like, oh my gosh, how worse does this get? How bad does it get? And can I feel more pain than I feel right now? And there were so many things that unfolded during that point for me. But one of the things I decided to do was to really start focusing on my desires. And I remember the moment where I was standing there after my husband died, and I was in this 1904 old rundown house, and I'm like, why am I here? How did I get here? Who did I do all of this for? And I realized that I was doing everything for everybody else except for me. And that when those other people were removed from my life, my husband passed, I was standing there in the middle of this life that I created, not feeling happy about it moving forward. I knew that I had to make a change happen. So for me, when we talk about motivation, it's been a long journey, and it's been a blessing, I think, to really gain the wisdom that I've had the opportunity to gain over these, decades, these decades of really cultivating a motivated mindset. And if you're going to start anywhere, I really encourage you to start looking at people who you think are motivated and read their books, read their stories. And I had this practice where every single day I was reading somebody's story. I got hooked on Oga Mandino, who wrote The Greatest Miracle in the World. And in that book, it talks about how you are not a tree condemned to a small plot. While the wind and world abuses you, you can run and stretch and dance and play and work. And you have choices. And that was very powerful to me, to be like, oh, wait a second. I don't have to be condemned to the small plot in my life. I don't have to feel like I'm powerless against what's happening on the outside of my world. And then I reflected on Viktor Frankl's words in the book In Man's Search for Meaning, where he said they could take away anything from me on the outside. And it was about life in the Nazi death camps. And he said they could take away anything from me, my clothing, my food, whatever. But the one thing that they can't take away is my power to think. And the power that I have to start changing my life from the inside of myself first.
Wow. Powerful stuff. Wow.
So to me, motivation, it's so powerful. And I'd love to, to continue the conversation and give more strategies about how people can cultivate motivation in their lives. But I know a lot of people in this industry have these thoughts that go way back. We all do. Just know that they are there. But what we've got to start doing is purposely recognizing them and going, interesting thought. Do I dwell on that thought, or do I say, I'll move on to a different thought? And typically it's about moving on to a different thought so that you can have a different feeling. And then your feelings will give you a different sense of energy, and that's going to inspire you and prompt you to take a different action in your life.
So if we were to look at kind of the framework that you just presented, so if we have some of these centers that we're working with, and as people are starting to reopen, I know a lot of the questions that I'm getting, and I'm sure they're similar to you, it is like, what's next? And how do I climb out of this? Am I going to be able to climb out of it? So like I just had a call with one of the centers that we work with. I believe they were in Texas yesterday, and those were kind of the conversations. And I think there's a lot of people that are kind of doubting their abilities. One of the center owners mentioned to me, they didn't use this exact phrase, but it's kind of what I thought of after our conversation, was like imposter syndrome of, geez, like they have 6 locations and they're like, well, I'm not even a teacher or an educator. I just kind of started this to be a growth-minded individual where I wanted to make an impact on communities, but I also wanted to build a legacy for myself and my family and my kids. And like they kind of were doubting everything that they've created. And one thing, I don't know, obviously would love to hear your input. I mean, one thing that I've always told people is that even if you've got a center that you're operating out of your house with a couple of families, I mean, you're still up to great things and up to big things. And one of my favorite books, I know we mentioned a lot of books on our episodes and shows, is Oh, the Places That You Will Go by Dr. Seuss. It's one of the books that I tend to give out to a lot of clients and kind of send it kind of randomly during the year. I think I've got by 20 copies at a time. And I think a lot of the people that are listening and that we're working with and just hopefully touch in some way through our words and content and such, that you're still making an impact. And just because there's been some setbacks, or just because you're kind of going through some challenging things, you're still up to good things. And the challenges should not necessarily just define everything that's currently going on. And I think that was one of the people that came on. I believe that was one of our guests, that, or maybe it was one of your quotes of not letting your present circumstances define everything.
Yeah.
So do you either have an example or a couple of tips? I think there are just a lot of people that are still very paralyzed of what do they do next. And we've talked about, you need to have a clear vision, and you need to rally your staff and your team around the vision. And we've talked about, you've got to make sure that you're communicating with your staff and really just, showing the vision and continuing to motivate them. We've talked about some tactics and strategies to start to drive some more leads that then start to hopefully equate to tours and enrollments. But obviously our topic for today is really more on looking inward to make sure that you are self-motivating so that you can continue to get past what's going on. Or whatever challenge that you're currently faced with. So I know a lot of our listeners love kind of practical tips and how-tos and step-by-steps and things like that. What would you kind of suggest to some of the people that are listening to kind of, what do they do first, or what do they do next?
And it's interesting. I think motivation it could be a very personalized journey. Right. So some people, it's like we say, cultivate a vision. They'll pull out a piece of paper and a pen and they'll start writing things down. And then they're like, woo, okay, I'm reflecting on this vision. I feel really good. And to me, it always comes back to the vision. But there's a lot of people who can't get to the vision. So it's really thinking in terms of what you want. And if you're saying, well, Julie, Michael, I don't know what it is that I want, because this is happening and that's happening and this is happening and that's happening. I encourage you to start by identifying how you want to feel. And how you want to feel. So do you want to feel energetic? Do you want to feel like an inspiration to others? Do you want to identify those feeling words? I want to feel happy. And then I would write those words down. And then I would start thinking about what helps you feel those things right now. Because regardless of what your vision is, or regardless of where you're at right now, it's important to identify, well, how do I want to feel? And then identify the things that help you feel that way. So for example, maybe you want to feel, we'll just take happy. Well, maybe you want to feel happy. So you have to identify, well, what makes you feel happy? And a lot of times, one of the top things, yes, is gratitude. Like Michael was saying, gratitude changes everything. So you pull out that gratitude list, and we've got several different ways we work with gratitude lists inside of teams. One is I call a positive list, and then there's power thoughts that we really work on and cultivate. But, what makes you happy? So when you could sit for a moment and you reflect in a space of gratitude, you'll start noticing your mindset shifting. And the cool thing is that you cannot think a negative thought and a positive thought at the same time. So if you make the decision, it starts with a decision. If you make the decision, I'm going to find something to be grateful for. And I used to go on gratitude stress breaks. So if I was feeling ticked off at my husband at the time, or whatever was going on, it wasn't quite right, I would get in my car and I would go on a gratitude drive. And I would just get in that car and I would start off probably pretty pissed off, pretty angry. And I'd be like, I'm thankful for this. I'm thankful for that. And then I'd start looking around me. I'm like, oh, wow, I'm thankful for that tree. I'm thankful for those birds. I'm thankful for the grass because I love the feeling of the grass on my feet. I would just let it expand. So I would take one thought and let it become expansive. I love that willow tree because when I was a kid, we used to swing from willow tree branches over the channel in our backyard. And I would really start looking at those things and letting it just web out or branch out into all of these different things that were related thoughts that were making me happy. So you could start off by cultivating one positive thought, one gratitude thought, and then letting it expand out. So before you know it, you've got a whole slew of positive thoughts that you're thinking. And our thoughts are incredibly powerful. And if you think about the amount of thoughts that we have every single day, it's somewhere between 40 to 60,000. 40 to 60,000 thoughts that we're thinking every single day. And of those thoughts that we're thinking every single day, there's a certain percentage of those thoughts that are negative. And that percentage is typically around 85%.
Well,
right? 85% negative thoughts. And then it's important to realize that we have a lot of repeating thoughts, repetitive thoughts. So on an everyday basis, it's like we're thinking 95% of the same thoughts day after day after day after day. And many people get stuck in this repeating pattern of thoughts that are like, oh, it's not going to work. It's not good enough. The world is going to collapse, whatever it might be. And we're caught in this cycle. And you might even hear this in other people where it's like they come to you. Maybe it's a family member, or right now, a mom or dad or a grandparent, whoever it is who's very fearful. And you'll hear the fear-based thought. You could hear it over and over and over and over again. But the important thing to do is to recognize your own fear-based thoughts, which is a little bit more difficult. But you could do it by paying attention to the words that come out of your mouth, the words that you're speaking. That's probably a pretty long-winded answer to your question.
That's great.
Yeah.
So I'd love one thing as you were talking that kind of came to mind that we do internally. I'll give a couple things that I think start to. For me, it's all about continuing to change those thoughts, and I like how you reminded everyone that you can't be thinking a positive and a negative thought at the exact same time.
You can't. Try it.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. You could flip.
Yeah,
you could flip, but you can't sit there and be like, oh, life is so wonderful, and thinking it sucks at the exact same time. You don't.
So what we did was a couple things. So we rolled out. So we use Teamwork, but it's very similar to Slack. So Teamwork Chat, in Voxer, there's lots of different tools, but we rolled out a channel called, Positive News. And every day throughout the day, any wins, we closed a new client, this client's #1 in Google, new website launches, logo done, just any kind of positive news, we're kind of loading them in there. And I found that really just continues to keep the team connected. But for me, I found, personally speaking, that unless I have positive kind of reinforcement and positive stuff happening throughout the day, that my thoughts tend to go back to the negative. Mm-hmm. And even when you start your day off with gratitude and you start, okay, great, you get all excited and geared up for the day, then all of a sudden, something goes wrong and it changes your mood. But I found that, okay, that may happen to me. But like you mentioned earlier, of kind of gratitude breaks. And then I'll go back and I'll start reading our positive channel and just start looking at and that I found starts to change my mood pretty quickly. Just being able to just read it, because then you start flooding your brain with more positive things.
That's true. And it's just like a workout. It's just like, anytime you start a new workout routine, I've been doing some dancing and I've got some total gyms upstairs. Anytime you start doing a workout, it's hard, and it's hard to shift your mindset. But the more you're like, I don't want to think this way, and you recognize that your thinking is, the old term, you're stinking thinking, your thinking is stinking. If you recognize that, then you could go, oh, well, wait a second. But the biggest challenge, especially in ourselves, we could see it in our team members. We could say, oh, their thinking is like they're negative. There's drama, there's gossip, there's this. It's really easy to see it in other people and to point it out, but it's more difficult to really recognize it in ourselves. And if we're looking at self-motivation, I agree with Michael, is that you've got to start the day putting positive in. And, it takes so much positive to counteract the negative, but it's almost like you have to develop new beliefs about yourself and your life. And that starts with the thoughts that you're thinking. And it becomes really important to become aware of those thoughts. So one of the things that I did really early on is I developed this formula for myself, and I actually laid it out on a sheet of paper, and I share it with my audiences when I speak. But I start with the negative thoughts. And what I do is I write down every single negative thought that pops into my mind. I write it down. And I write it down until I exhaust them all, right? There's not enough time. Who's going to call out sick today? Why are they going and enrolling at the larger program? All of these thoughts, we write it down, and that's the first column. And then what we have to do is work on transforming that to a positive replacement thought. And there's a specific way that we do the positive replacement thoughts, but you write them down. So if you're thinking a thought like, I'm not good enough, you say, every day in every way, I'm getting better and better. I look forward to feeling incredibly happy in my life. So they've got to be a related thought. It can't just be like a different thought, like, oh, well, look, the sun is out. I don't feel good enough, but the sun is out. It doesn't do it. And your subconscious will call BS to that. And they'll be like, yeah, but you still don't feel good about yourself. You still don't like who you are. So gratitude can start changing things, but it's really to become aware of what are those negative thoughts that are really sucking the life out of me. And they're playing a role in the background because it's just like, I know you're very technically orientated. I'm probably unlike myself, but all of our computers have an operating system, right? And you could say, okay, this has, Windows 95 or whatever it is, and you try to put a program in it of something else, and it's still going to default back to, hey, this is the way I operate. This is Windows 95 talking here. I'm not the millennial version yet. So we're always going to be defaulting back to that place. Unless you're really, really, really cultivating a mindset. Like for me, dummy was just a subconscious thought I had over and over and over and over again until I worked the replacement thoughts enough to where it's like, oh, well, yeah, that's silly. This is not a dumb girl. This is a very bright girl. But I had to feed myself those messages. So step number 1 is to become aware of what those negative thoughts are. Write them down, as painful as they are. But once you write them down, it's almost like your mind is saying, well, wait a second, maybe you don't have to think these thoughts anymore because they're on a piece of paper. And what you have to do is look at that list of negative thoughts that you've written down and go, how many of these are really true? And how many of these untrue thoughts am I letting guide my entire life? And chances for most of us, we're taking, 87% of the thoughts that we're thinking every single day, and we're saying, these are not true thoughts, but these are going to guide me in my everyday activities. These are going to keep me stuck from calling and talking to some parents on the phone, or calling people who came in for a tour and didn't enroll, or, making that phone call to get featured on the front page of the newspaper, which you all can be, right? So it's the thought that stops you from taking the action. And the thoughts that stop us are so untrue. They're not true, but yet they're so much in control of the action that we're either taking or not taking.
Just letting it all kind of marinate in my mind. So that's kind of how I like to take things, and always kind of percolating. I mean, I know a lot of you ask for, Julie and Michael, how we need more enrollments, and okay, great. We need to hire great staff, and all these things that I would deem more tactical, and we'll continue to go over that content in future episodes, and we have a lot already. But when Julie and I were kind of prepping for today's show, we were looking at what are some of the challenges that a lot of the center owners and directors and leaders are currently faced with. And it does come down to self-motivation and mindset. And if you're continuously coming from negative attitudes, negative thoughts, energy about yourself, things from the past that you haven't either kind of worked through and worked past and kind of continued to work on, it makes it a little bit more challenging in the sense of just being able to, I guess, take those next actions. And until you have these things kind of, I don't want to say worked, like completed, but until you've moved the needle past some of this stuff, it's going to be an uphill battle to grab those new enrollments, because attitude and energy is everything. Yeah. And I know that, like, when I've shown up for sales calls and demos and things like that, if I don't have myself in kind of that right frame of mind, then the demo isn't going to be as good. And it's going to be the same thing with a tour. And one of my first life coach, or was my first life coach, a gentleman named Matthew Ferry, who still puts out lots of amazing content. He really talked a lot about kind of scarcity. And if you're having that scarcity mindset, that you're going to kind of muck everything up, and you're going to botch the tour potentially, or you're going to botch the phone call because you're inherently attached to the outcome.
Yeah.
And when I started to like remove that attachment, and I'm finding that a lot of people are doing that now because they're like, I've got to get these enrollments. I've got to get like now, or if I don't have this now, then it's the sky is falling. And that energy and that attitude really does come through over the phone, and it comes through in person.
Yeah.
And when you really start to, again, practice gratitude and, as you said, continue to kind of write down those thoughts that you're having so that you're able to kind of work through this throughout the day, and just continue to have those kind of gratitude breaks and just continue to try and fill yourself with positivity, it'll continue to move you in the right direction, and you'll start to find magical things happen. And I know that you've obviously talked a lot about, I mean, consciousness and kind of the subconscious and law of attraction. And I never, way back when, I didn't really believe in all of that until you started seeing it. And you can't move past things until you start to try new things. And it's that whole definition of insanity that everyone repeats over and over and over again anyways. And I'm encouraging you to start to show up in a different way and just take baby steps. I mean, for me, and I mean, for people like Julian and myself that have been doing a lot of this work for years and years and years, and studying it, and I mean, hiring lots of mentors and experts and going to live events. And some of my first clients in my first agency were all speakers and authors. So not only did I get to, I mean, help them with their marketing, I got all their content for free. So some life coaches and Stephen Sadler, who's a meditation expert, and like all this really great content. And I went through all of it, but what I found was it was very, very overwhelming. And I'll share this last story, and then I'll let you give some good either tips or actions or a story, whatever you'd like to share. I would go to a lot of their events so that I could meet them in person. And then also just to kind of learn a little bit more about the type of people that were coming to these events. And what I started to find was if I would go to the same speaker's event, so let's say they had an event in, I don't know, January, and then they had another event 3 months later. And a lot of the times, and this is still a lot of the, I hate to use the word game, but to me, it's a little bit of a game where, okay, great, you come in, you pay $200 for your ticket, and then 3 months later, they're going to, I mean, you got the next event, and that's a $5,000 or $10,000. It's a lot of how the industry goes. Not saying that everyone is like that, but that's often how it goes. Not in a bad way. I mean, a lot of their content is great at those next levels. But what I found was I would talk to the people that were at the $200 or that initial one-day event that then purchased, let's say, the 3-day or the 5-day. And then maybe they would buy the 10-day, or they would buy that, they kind of would go up that ascension ladder. And I would say, well, why do you keep coming back? Because I felt for me that the $200, the 1 day, that gave me so much actionable content that I personally didn't feel the need. And I still was going to all these because I got them for free, but I didn't feel the need to have to invest.
Yeah.
And I just was asking a lot of these people, what made you invest? And my hidden agenda was to try and figure out was there something that I was missing. And obviously I didn't want to negatively impact the speakers that we were working with, because if they were clients, if they realized that I was going around saying like, hey, why are you here?
Right.
I'm like, that might not come across the right way. And what I realized was that most people, they wanted to just be in that state of mind and kind of feel good. But they were not taking any actions. They would feel great for that day, and then it would go back to normal. And the reason I kind of shared the story was I'm all about taking baby steps and just take kind of inspired actions. So what is that one thing that you want to try and start to do tomorrow? Is it you're going to wake up 5 minutes earlier and you're going to do a gratitude log? Is it you're going to read one of the books that we've recommended today, and you're going to commit to reading it and then taking some kind of action from it? Are you going to start to write down the negative thoughts that you're hearing and feeling? So what is that one thing that you can do to just take those baby steps because again, I have found that if I don't take baby steps, as Tony, and I quote Tony Robbins a lot, I'm a big Tony Robbins fan, that he says, I mean, progress equals happiness. If you do not start to feel the progress and see the progress, you are going to you're going to start to lose your momentum. So
I love that. I love that. I think that's so true.
That's what I got for today.
So. And you summarized a lot of actionable items, and and I think we could do a whole other show just on attraction and give you stories about how that works in childcare programs and in life. But it's about attraction, and there's deeper stuff in there that I won't get to today. But, if I were to give you a starting place for today, yeah, definitely write down everything Michael said. So just come back, re-listen to his whole recap there. But also, decide when you're in a good frame of mind, like listen to your favorite song, right? I used to tell my audiences, like in the olden days, like make several copies of your favorite song and put it on audio cassettes wherever you're at. And today you have no excuse. You're with your phone. You can listen to your favorite song over and over and over and over again. But it only takes about 6 seconds to really start changing our moods. So if you can give yourself that 6 seconds to say, I'm going to do something for me. I'm going to get up and dance to my favorite song. I'm going to just listen to music. I'm going to sing. I'm going to call somebody who I care about and reach out to them and just say, I love you. I'm going to look at some pictures that remind me of who I am. And there's a whole lot of other strategies that I could give you, but just decide to do something for 6 seconds. And once you're into that 6 seconds, decide to take it to another level and say, okay, well, maybe I'll give it 10 or 15 seconds. And then you can work up your routine to where it's 5 minutes and I know Tony Robbins, saw him recently doing an interview, and he's like, 11 minutes. 11 minutes in the morning is all I need. And then the whole day is golden. So, but start with 6 seconds. Just decide to do something. And then also decide on what core beliefs you're going to manage your life by. Your beliefs about yourself. And those could be, I am energetic, I am giving, whatever it might be. I love life. I believe in abundance. And if you start adapting something like, I believe in abundance as one of your core beliefs, and then you start guiding your life by that belief, everything can change. But we'll say that for another show.
Love it. So let's recap the book recommendations that you gave.
Okay.
And then we'll end with our quote. It seemed like an hour flies by. It flew by.
Oh my gosh, I know.
So, but I hope everyone.
And if you're here tuning in, make sure you share out the show, like us, love us. If you love what we're doing, let us know. We both would love to hear from you. And yeah. So go ahead, Michael.
No, definitely. I was kind of writing them down feverishly, but I'm going to let you. So I know Man's Search for Meaning you've mentioned a few times. I am a big fan of all the various books on happiness. So I'll bring up Amazon Live because I have them all on my my little list here. But The Happiness Advantage was a really great book.
Nice.
I'm a huge fan of Tony Hsieh. So Delivering Happiness. That's kind of when he went on this whole quest when he was building Zappos.
Oh, nice. Love
company,
that.
Which got acquired by Amazon. So that was his whole philosophy was around kind of happiness. And then the other one that I really like is Happiness by Design. I mean, it's an older book, but it's a really good book, similar to just kind of life by design in general. But those are the three that I had mentioned. And I know Man's Search for Meaning was one, and I know you mentioned a couple other really good books.
So in Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, a must-read book. Erroneous Zones by Dr. Wayne Dyer is one that I read, and this one really talks about the unnecessary zones of life that we carry around with us, like feeling guilty and things that really don't serve us, but we choose to keep them in our lives. And he talks about eliminating all those things from our lives. A fantastic read. Og Mandino, Og Mandino is a spiritual writer, so it could take a very spiritual tone. But in Man's Search for Meaning, there's a book, there's a back section called The God Memorandum. And that to me was very powerful. And it's just talking to you about all of your blessings in life, and whether you're spiritual or not, you could kind of take it and just go, oh, okay, I didn't think about that. So that was very powerful. Was there any others that I mentioned? I think that's probably the gist of them.
Yeah, those are the good ones for today. So quick plug for you, because I know that you've got some of these shirts and fun things headed my way. And I've seen a couple of my clients have ordered some. Awesome. So I just love the designs, and you came out with some other new designs. So Want to have you plug the shirts
I don't know
again.
if you could see this one.
That's fun. I like that. I like the
Yeah,
black and
so this
blue.
one is early childhood educator, and we're having some of these made as well, but the line is doing fantastic. It's our Always Essential line. Now, let me just pull this one here. But yeah.
So where can people go to order some of the gear? I think it's a great thing for your team, for yourself, for it definitely exudes positivity, and it just they're beautiful designs. So I can't
and we're having people who are like getting these for their team uniforms. They're like,
I love it.
Like every day, people are sending us pictures of their entire team wearing the gear. So that's
a great idea. That's awesome. A great idea.
Yeah, so you could go to happychildcareteam.com. Good name, right? That's a redirect domain, but it'll get you there. So happychildcareteam.com, and you'll be able to check out all of the gear over there.
Love it.
Yeah. And where can people find out more information about you? And then I also want to tell everybody before we wrap up about a free masterclass that I have on my website.
Perfect.
Let's give your information out.
Yeah.
I know people are connecting with you and want to chat.
Yep. So localchildcaremarketing.com. That is the digital agency that I own and run that serves the childcare industry. So that's where you can go and you can schedule what we call an enrollment acceleration session. That's with me personally.
Awesome. And you can find me at childcarebusinesssuccess.com if you don't go to Happy Childcare Team, but go to childcarebusinesssuccess.com. And right there on the homepage, there's a free webinar, free masterclass called the Drive Method, which is a method that I teach to accelerate your childcare business success. And it changes your life not only professionally, but personally. So go there, sign up for the masterclass, and let me know how you like it.
Love it. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. I'm going to let Julie end with a positive quote if she has one ready.
Let's see.
Grab your book, but make sure you tune back in here on Thursday. So Thursday, 9 Central, 10 Eastern. Share this, like it, leave some comments, questions. We are here to serve you.
Yeah, and this quote I actually pulled this week, and this is an amazing book, The Dynamic Laws of Prosperity. But this one just really touched me, so I wanted to share this one with everybody about a truth that we all need to be reminded of. Every obstacle rushes to get out of the way of the man who knows where he is going. And the world seems on the side of the man who tries to rise. And this is by Catherine Ponder from The Dynamic Laws of Prosperity.
Love it. Love it. Thank you ever so much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. We will see you back here on Thursday. See you.
Bye, everyone.
Have a good day.